Leonardo DiCaprio.
Miss Anne Hathaway.
Meryl Streep, the Iron Lady.
Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine.
Kevin Costner.
Yes. The King's Speech.
Birdman.
I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Redoing the Oscars. And this week we're going to be looking at the 2005 Oscars, talk about some alternative nominated and unnominated picks, why I think Keira Knightley is the ultimate kind of should have been the winner, kind of redoing things, as well as talk about a performance that I love that wasn't even nominated, before we're trying to figure out, did the Academy get it right? We've been doing this every single week now since 2015, so thank you guys for coming along. Now we've multiple episodes into this series, and guess what? Next week we're going to do 2004, next week we're going to do 2003. The only difference is we switch it up every week. Some weeks we talk about the actress category and redoing that category. Some weeks we talk about Best Picture. Always having a lot of fun, and I always encourage you as well to comment below and let me know your thoughts, your picks for this year. It really is just a thought exercise to give you an insight into some of my personal picks and tastes, and also to open the conversation up to you. Think about, okay, if I were to redo a category, one of those big ones, the 4 acting, director, or picture, what would I do? Because rarely the Academy gets it right 100% of the time, and we can kind of look at things and go, all right, well, what would have happened if this person won an Oscar? Would that have changed their career? How do we look at things? And ultimately use this as an opportunity to celebrate great performances. The winners have been celebrated. They're in the history books. They're in the annals. Nothing can change that. But at least with this series, we can talk about some other great performances that maybe we even forgot were nominated, that maybe should have the more celebration than we think, and kind of redoing things from 20-year now perspective on the award show. But as always, we like to start off each episode with some context. So let's get into things. The 2005 Oscars year, where were we? What's the context? And this was the Crash Oscars. And I thought about, redoing Best Picture. And it probably is the one that makes the most sense. Crash has widely been covered and seen as the worst Best Picture winner, I think, of the 21st century, maybe one of the worst Best Picture winners of all time. But we have mentioned this debate before. Last summer, I did a series called After the Gold, in which I covered filmmakers' next film after winning Best Picture, and we talked about this on In the Valley of the Elah episodes. The director, Paul Haggis, In the Valley of Elah, much better than Crash. Crash has been, the Crash Brokeback Mountain debate, I guess, has been settled many times and covered many times online. So I didn't feel like the need to rehash things and talk about things, in particular just because I just did that and corrected a famous wrong when I talked about The Social Network over The King's Speech. Instead, I think we can talk about the Best Actress category, which has, an opportunity in this episode to talk about 2 of my favorite films from that year and 2 awesome performances. So I know the obvious one probably would have been to go with Brokeback Mountain over Crash, but I felt like that had been talked about a little bit too much, and maybe there was an alternative angle here. And then talking about some of the, Best Picture was wrongly chosen, I think, but then talking about some of the other winners in the main categories, something like the acting categories. I think the common theme from this year is actors we like in movies that haven't really been super well remembered or super beloved or super rewatchable. So let's take an actor like George Clooney. Kind of weird that he has 2 Oscars. One, though, for supporting actor in a war movie that people don't really rewatch today, in Syriana for this year, and then also one for Best Picture for Argo. You think of George Clooney, you think of a big movie star. It's odd that he didn't win for Best Lead Actor in a big movie star type of a role, instead of winning in the supporting category. Similarly, I think with Rachel Weisz, who's an actress that still does great work today, but maybe the Constant Garner, not really connecting to a major tour, not necessarily rewatched a lot, very definitely in a supporting actress role in which she's really just in the first 45 minutes of the movie, and then there's a hour and a half left still of the film. And then someone like a Philip Seymour Hoffman, who I absolutely love in Capote, and I love the movie. I don't know if it has the same admiration, his performance, as compared to some of his performances in other Paul Thomas Anderson movies, in which he probably maybe should have won for those, or maybe something like 25th Hour or Todd's Lawns of Happiness. Like, I think those are maybe more definitive of his roles, even though I think everyone's glad he has an Oscar, and even though personally I absolutely love Capote and think he's fantastic in it. So ultimately I looked at the best actress category, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So talking about my alternative nominated pick, someone who was nominated this year that I think should have won, as the title suggested. I think Keira Knightley in Pride and Prejudice should have been the winner here at the 2005 Oscars for Best Lead Actress. And while I love Reese Witherspoon, I think it's the same scenario as Clooney or Rice, where it's like, she's a big movie star, and actually still a big star, even more so than Keira Knightley in 2026. And yet, Walk the Line isn't as celebrated as a movie as compared to Pride and Prejudice. Last year, there was a 20th anniversary screening of the film where they re-released it in theaters. I saw it in theaters to a packed house. There was a lot of people there loving the movie, and you just don't see that with Walk the Line. Pride and Prejudice is a deeply loved movie, so much so that they have 20-year anniversary re-releases in cinemas and they are sold out and they make a lot of money compared to a movie like Walk the Line. So you have an opportunity, a rare opportunity for the Oscars to actually give an Oscar to the performer's most iconic role. You could say it's, Pride and Prejudice, or you could also say maybe Elizabeth Swann in the Pirates films, but I'd say, let's go with Pride and Prejudice here. You have that opportunity and you don't do that, which is why I'm redoing things here. And what I love about Keira's performance the most is also what I love about the film, and it's translation ability. Its ability to take an older classic story that can feel difficult to get into just because so much time has passed, and make it feel modern and make it feel resonant. And I'm not saying that in a literal translation ability in terms of the dialogue necessarily, but you do notice this with older books, Bronte books, Austen books, that kind of a period, or even going into the Shakespearean side of things, where because the language was different and the society was so different, I know, at least me personally, I find a lot of period pieces kind of stodgy and boring and hard to get into and hard to actually just basically understand because of the barrier of the language, or the barrier of the societal differences of land and marriage and dowries and all this kind of complex situations that don't really happen in the modern day age. It's difficult to understand why these books were classics. But what Joe Wright, and in particular Keira Knightley, is able to do is translate that for a modern audience, and they do that by understanding the emotion of things. That if you see great Shakespeare, you don't necessarily understand every nuance of the language, but if a great performer brings a certain element of emotion to it, you don't necessarily need to understand what they're saying, you understand what they're feeling and the emotion of the story, and I think Keira is able to do that. She takes a very kind of Shakespearean or theatrical style of performance for this film, and it works very well. She is very big. There is no Botox use on her face. There's wrinkles and scrunches, and she uses her teeth a lot and her eyes, and she's always moving around. She has this unnervy ability, but what that ultimately does is very clearly and obviously communicate the themes of the story, the themes of love and doubt and unsureness and joy and happiness. Like, she delivers all that within the film, in part because she makes her acting and the emotion of her character so clear by having these larger approaches that we don't necessarily see in film. Oftentimes film, you try to be smaller, you try to be more subtle, but sometimes when you have the barrier of just not really understanding the society or understanding the language or understanding why this is a classic, it helps to have a performer very communicate that very clearly by being big, by wearing their emotions on their sleeves. So there's no guessing as to the stakes of the story. And a lot of that is rested upon Keira and her ability to, express these emotions. It's easy to say, okay, in order to make this movie more modern, we have to have an actor who will express the emotions and make sure that those are clear. Well, you actually have to have an actor that's able to do all that, to show joy and love and happiness, but also, that doubt as well as that yearning. So she's just a perfect performer in this film, and understanding what she needs to do, executing on that, and being that emotional vessel for the film that makes it, I think, such a successful modern adaptation. But if we were talking about another performer that I think should have been nominated and maybe even considered for the Oscars, I'm going to go with Coriana Kilsher from The New World, an introducing performance the first time she had been on screen, just 14 years old, and she is absolutely magnetic in the film and is the heart of the movie. This was a movie that I rewatched in order for this episode, and I remember always loving the movie and loving her performance, but when I was rewatching it, that first 45 minutes, she's not in a lot of it, and I started to wonder to myself, like, oh, did I make a wrong selection here? Am I going to have to pick someone else? She's not in a lot of the movie. Is this kind of like this exoticism kind of performance? And you forget and start to realize, particularly in the second half of the movie, when she becomes our main character, just how much she's able to take the interiority of the story, take over that narration in certain moments, and ultimately, I think, match the speed of the film. Terrence Malick, with this film, combines, I think, the kind of lyrical, montage-esque liquid narrative of his later films with the kind of more traditional linear narratives of his earlier movies and kind of combines them. You have the handheld Lubezki cinematography and the montages, but it's still kind of on rails with a somewhat linear story. And it is a great combination. But a lot of the emotion from the film comes from her performance, comes from the first half being Colin Farrell's character entering into a foreign world, and the second half being Kilsher's character entering into a foreign world, a world that's maybe more familiar to us, but still a foreign world to her. And you have that kind of fish out of water in the kind of two parallel narratives of the first and the second half of the film. And when she does become our protagonist, you start to bring some of that empathy, that emotion, that understanding of the uncomfortability of the situation, her complex feelings of having genuine love for this man that she has met in the case of John Smith, but then also kind of egging on or creating further political difficulties for her community. And her genius within the film, ultimately, I think, is her ability to control her speed and her ability to use her eyes and her head. So on the speed side of things, when you see a Malick film, it's about floating, it's about gliding, it's very kind of soft and ethereal and natural, and she matches that pace very well. She feels like she's a part of the film in just her slowness of her movements, in the way she touches grass or wheat. She is able to kind of move through and understand the kind of tone and pace of the camera in which she's kind of matching it in many ways. So it doesn't feel like someone kind of following and matching along with the performer, as it is almost like the internal thoughts and the POV of our characters floating along with the character. So just from a physical point of view, I think she's remarkable at kind of understanding what movie she's in and the pace of it very well, which is a difficult and strange thing to point out, but I do think it is a testament to how well the movie looks, is how well the performers are able to match the kind of tone and atmosphere of the images that are being captured. But then also I mentioned her eyes and her head, and she communicates a lot with that, particularly with the first half of the movie, because the level of communication between the two characters are low. They don't speak the same language. They're from these completely different cultures. You see, in the first half of the movie, she has her eyes locked in on John Smith. There is a sense of joy and love and happiness in a way, because she's constantly looking at him. She's constantly kind of locking eyes. Her head is up, engaged in movement. And in the second half of the movie, much more uncomfortable, so her head tilts down. Her eyes are always looking at the ground. We never really get a good look at her. She's kind of trying to be a little bit avoidant to characters because she's unsure, because she's in this kind of a foreign land. She doesn't necessarily know who to trust or where her family is, or she's been kind of ostracized. So that kind of sense of isolation, which is so much to the theme, simply has to in part due to her performance style of whether or not she's looking up or looking down or using her eyes, or the slow tiltness, again, to those movements and those considered movements of her performance style. Crazy that at only 14 years old, she's able to give this excellent of a performance. I think in part the reason why she wasn't nominated was this movie wasn't really all that celebrated, just got nominated for Best Cinematography, but odd because The Thin Red Line was a Best Picture movie, and when I think about The New World, I think of it as one of Malick's best. It's on the Criterion Collection, so it is a hallowed movie today, and a movie I absolutely love. And on rewatch, I was just kind of reminded again at how special her performance is. Even though she hasn't gone on to do 10 other amazing performances and become one of the greatest actors of all time, she still is a great working actor. And it shows up in a lot of great things, but her role here, I think, and her kind of mesh with Malik is very special. I think of her almost like a Christoph Waltz with a Quentin Tarantino. I mean, certain actors just work really well with certain directors. They kind of understand the type of movies and their vision, and I think similarly here with Kilshner is just the kind of perfect match here with Malik in her movements, in her style of speed, and the way she's able to express emote just through her eyes and through her head tilts. Very powerful stuff, very simple and simply deceptive things going on here, but at least to me, it brings so much of the emotional weight, particularly in that second half of the story, is all through her expression and her ability to communicate her uneasiness and complex feelings and unsureness and uncomfortableness, but also wanting to express love and have joy and happiness, and that kind of drainage that we see throughout the film is, I think, in large part my enjoyment of some of the themes. But to end things off, let's try to decide, did the Academy make the right decision? And ultimately, I'm going to go with a no, a definitive no here. Reese Witherspoon, a great actress, maybe not an all-timer actress, more popular, today than Keira Knightley, all things I consider. But Keira Knightley, this is her iconic role. This is her definitive role. It's a movie that has stood the test of time. It's a movie that people still watch. And this is an opportunity to reward her for one of her iconic roles. And even if she goes on to make many other great films, Keira Knightley does, she will still always be remembered for this film and for this performance. So I think ultimately they did make a mistake because they had a rare opportunity to make of course they didn't know at the time that this would be her best performance, but it was a rare opportunity to reward her for just an absolutely dynamic and relevant and resonant performance that people today still absolutely love. And they didn't do that. They went with Reese Witherspoon in a movie that she's good, but not her definitive performance, I think, which is kind of unfortunate, but how things ended up happening. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you comment below. Let me know your thoughts again on the 2005 category for the Oscars, whether it be the Best Actress category or Best Picture or anything like that. Love to hear your thoughts. And stay tuned to next week. We're going to be, of course, looking at the 2004 Oscars. You'll have to wait and see which category I picked for that. But I had a lot of fun prepping that one as well. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.